if I wanted to be home on a Saturday and be present with my kids, I had to figure like the art of delegation, right? So I think for everybody listening, you're right. You're amazing. You can do all of this stuff. Like, that's not a question. You figured out how to be a jack of all trades, but what do you want the business to look like? What do you want your life to look like? And a lot of times, the only way you're really going to feel good about taking off on a vacation and your customers being taken care of is there's somebody to help you when you're gone.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a fun one. Our guest is the founder of Well-Oiled Operations, where she teaches mid-sized business owners effective operational systems so that they can feel confident knowing that their business can run effectively without them. Stacy Tuschl, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you, Stacy. And before we get into get a well-oiled operation, which I know our listeners is probably thinking, I could use one of those. Tell us a little bit about yourself leading up to what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started right out of high school with my entrepreneurial journey. I started teaching dance classes in my parents' backyard for fun, for free. Little did I know I was on my way to building a business. And within like 3 years, I had 100 dancers and then a couple hundred and then a couple thousand. And now I have, I actually own 3 children's performing arts academies in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Wow.
And I've been doing that the last 21 years. Well-Oiled kind of sparked because I started to learn how to delegate and grow my team and get more time back. And then all of a sudden, I didn't have much left to do in the business. And I started to get other people, the business owners, asking, could you consult me? Could you share what you've been doing? And that's when I sparked the second business, Well-Oiled, about 8 years ago. And now I teach other people how I run like a multiple 7-figure per year business, but it doesn't actually need me in the day-to-day operations.
Wow. Well, quite a story and very interesting beginnings. I'm sure it hasn't been complete smooth sailing all the way.
No.
I'd love to hear what have been some of the challenges building all of that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I think the first one is probably identity, right? Like, who am I to do this, right? I wasn't even that like good of a dancer, right? I didn't even have like this expertise of doing it a long time. I actually started dancing in high school. So for me when somebody said, you should have your own studio, my thought was, but I should have been dancing since I was 3. Like, I didn't have the area, the credibility, that area of expertise. So it was just like knowing that and then doing it anyway, right? And then, the identity just keeps changing. Well, who am I to not be in the classroom? Who am I to write a book? Who am I to have a podcast, right? And I just had to keep pushing through those previous identities, which is really scary, right? But getting through on the other side and feeling those rewards. So I would say that's a big one. Obviously, financials, right? Keeping up with, I always say it was really easy until I started charging. When it was free, it was so easy. There was no money involved. People just thought I was amazing giving this amazing service. And then once I started charging and spending, that can be a whole nother recipe of a disaster. So I think really just getting good with my numbers, getting good at finances, getting good at managing quite a bit of money coming through our doors.
And what did that look like? I mean, I'm sure our listeners of bookkeeping business owners are really curious what that journey, so maybe we can go a little deeper into that story.
Yeah. I think for me, who am I learning money from, right? Outgrowing specific CPAs, outgrowing specific companies where they were no longer serving me, right? I was maybe giving not the greatest advice. So like, for instance, my first CPA really taught me the strategy of spend all your money and don't have a profit. And then you won't have to pay the IRS all this money. And I was like, yeah, that sounds really smart. And I would be broke every year. Like I would spend all of it. I would go, what else do the dance studios need? Let's buy new flooring. Let's buy new this. And, that advice I held on to for quite a while. And I stayed pretty broke for quite a while. And then realizing, again, a new identity, right? Like what if my identity is I actually pay quite a bit in taxes, but I'm wealthy, right? Like I actually have something to show for it. So I think for me, it was just, I was outgrowing my money habits and I was outgrowing the people teaching me about money. So what is that next level? Right? Who is the next person I want to learn from? And when I'm hiring somebody, I'm always thinking, I don't want to be your big dog. Like I want to make sure you've got somebody way bigger than me so that I'm not the guinea pig, right? That we're not guessing when we're giving me advice, but you're telling me what the people bigger than me are currently doing. That's what I'm looking for.
Wow. That's really interesting. The big dog, often people don't think about that when they're hiring a vendor to help them. It's like, if you're the biggest client that they've worked with, the most complex, you're the guinea pig.
Yeah.
And in some cases that might be a good thing. In many, it's probably not. This is a great example. What was the breakthrough for going from, okay, I'm not making any more money, I'm spending a lot, and you had this sort of epiphany of, I'm going to be a person who pays a lot of tax, but, which is a good, I pay so much tax, I got lots of profit. What was the breakthrough for that?
I think for me, it was just having a new CPA, like a new accountant come in and say, like, but how is this working for you? Like, do you really like the way that this is working? Do you really like, does this make sense? Right. And it was just like another new mindset and another thing that I just had never heard of or never thought of. Or I think this journey for me has just been constant growth, right? And learning like what's next. And what do you know that I don't know, Michael? Like teach me everything, right? And really being open to learning from others.
Very cool. I love that. That's a great one for our listener. Just that question alone. How is this working for you? Sit back and listen. That really gets to the source of maybe you're happy not having any profit, right?
Yeah. Maybe you're like, this is great.
That can often be the problem solver's problem, is trying to solve a problem before they actually know what the problem is. And so great, some really cool ways of thinking about it. And I love that question, especially for our listener to use in their next prospective client meeting, which is, hey, how's this working for you? Very good. So you made those changes. You have now gone on and grown these businesses. Were there any other big challenges in scaling? I mean, we talked about the finance, obviously. We talked about imposter syndrome, I guess that comes up a ton on the podcast. But then you expanded, you have multiple locations. I mean, there's lots there.
Yeah. I think, what is it going to take? Who is it going to take? Right. I had to learn how to hire and let go. So today I have probably like 30 some employees in the one business, 20 some employees in the other.
Wow.
And trust me, 15, 20 years ago, I could not let go. I really believed I could do it better than everybody and I should be doing this. And everybody wanted me. Nobody would take another teacher. They needed Stacy, right? And I quickly realized that if I wanted to stay at that level where it was just me and me doing everything, then there was going to be a cap, right? I mean, that's it. It's, again, maybe you're happy with that. Maybe that's exactly what you want. And that cap you're completely fine with. I wasn't fine with a cap. I wanted to keep growing. So I knew I would have to learn the skill set of delegating, letting go of control, not micromanaging, right? And it wasn't this natural behavior for me. I had to truly learn it. And definitely some lessons learned that way, right? Giving somebody too much control. And then all of a sudden they just, turn around and do something that ruins your reputation, right? Not giving enough authority and control, and they feel like they're being micromanaged, so they quit and leave and they go someplace else where they're not going to have a boss that's, looking over their shoulder 24/7. So it was really having to start to find this opportunity to shine a light on others, let others lead, let others take charge, right? But at the same time, inspecting what I expect and being a leader and supporting, right? Giving them the trainings, the support, the tools they need, but also giving them accountability, right? So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I had to work through was, how am I going to do this? How am I going to start to little by little, like I didn't go from 0 to 50 employees, right? It's just one at a time. And who's the next best person to bring onto the team? That was a big one. And it's scary to bring more people on.
Absolutely. It is. And so you brought, which would be natural, you're kind of adding people. Was there, I guess you think of, oh, we're going to do this, like, just like when you added clients, they were free. Yeah. You went to charging money. You hit these little plateaus perhaps, or ceilings where it's like beyond your expertise, or maybe you make mistakes. What was that with the scaling? Did you hit barriers and then have to sort of figure that out?
Yeah, for sure. And I think what happens is we become these jack of all trades where we can do everything, right? So we really can do all these activities. So we hold on to them for way too long. And it's not about like, oh, well, you can do it, Michael, so you don't need to hire. It's, yeah, but Michael, you're one person and there's only so many hours in a week and you will max out or burn out if you keep going at this pace. So what is something we can start to let go of? What is something we can start to delegate, right? And it was just little by little going, they might not do it as well as me, but if I don't pour into them and teach them and support them, no one, like this is not going to be a fun life. I'm not going to love what I'm doing if I'm the only one that can answer customer complaints, or if I'm the only one that can sell in my business. This is going to be me working 24/7. And I did not want that. I wanted to be a mom eventually. Like I wanted to have a family. And I knew, especially with my business, like we're a second shift business, a weekend business. If I wanted to be home on a Saturday and be present with my kids, I had to figure like the art of delegation, right? So I think for everybody listening, you're right. You're amazing. You can do all of this stuff. Like that's not a question. You figured out how to be a jack of all trades, but what do you want the business to look like? What do you want your life to look like? And a lot of times, the only way you're really going to feel good about taking off on a vacation and your customers being taken care of is there's somebody to help you when you're gone, right? There's somebody to help you on a Friday night working, right? If you want to be off.
When it comes to the delegation, you mentioned that. What were some things that helped you get there? For our listener, it really is. I mean, when you think about what this looks like, if you can have people doing the work and have people off and have the tasks and the things that need to get done off of your plate, opens up all sorts of opportunities. Yeah. How do they get there? What are some of the steps?
So sometimes people go, okay, I'm going to hire a marketer. I'm going to hire somebody to do sales, right? But that's not where I would suggest starting. I would look at, what are you currently doing that is so easy? You could clearly teach somebody how to do this, right? And you put something easy off your plate and you just quickly inspect it, right? Because a lot of people listening are thinking, yeah, but what if they mess up? And this is my reputation. Okay, well, you have them do it, but you're the final set of eyes before your customers see it, right? So they're doing like a lot of the work up front, and it's easy for you to just go in and fix a few things versus spending hours doing the original, okay? If that's the easy part, you take on, with that free time you now have, you take on marketing, you take on sales, you try to bring on more clients, right? Like if we can get you working on the higher dollar per hour type activities, you're going to see a much bigger difference in your business than outsourcing to a new marketer who doesn't know much about you or how to sell or what your product looks like, or right, all of that. That's going to be way, way harder. So I would just give like the little things that nobody can mess up, right? And if they do, you're going to be the second eyeballs.
It's great. There's some really great thinking in that, because often too, those higher dollar, there's higher risk that it doesn't actually work as well. So if you can take the lower hanging fruit, Willie, and outsource those, you have low risk, and likely you can really successfully offload it and be able to monitor that and free up some time.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes people do those things because they avoid, like, oh, I got to do the higher dollar one. So maybe it's a challenge of am I any good at the sales, or I don't like the
Yes.
sales? How do you help people with those situations?
That's such a good point, Michael. So first of all, you're probably not that good at marketing and sales. Like, you're a bookkeeper. I was a dance teacher. Like, I didn't know how to market, right? But I do believe that it is a skill set we all need to learn as a business owner. Okay. So you don't have to have the identity of like, I'm a natural skilled marketer. No, but you should start investing your time in learning the basics, right? I really believe that you will learn how to sell this business, your services, so much better than an outsider coming in who has a marketing skill set but doesn't know the product, right? So I just have found so much more success in me really learning who my person is, really learning about like the gap between where they are and where they want to be, and learning that language, that information. And I start to discover it, right? Like, people, when I go to sell, they'll say, oh my goodness, you know exactly like what I'm thinking, right? I've already said this, I've already thought this. And it's just because I've talked to my people so much. The more you talk to your current clients about their struggles, their worries, their fears, before you even sell them, the people that don't buy from you, what are their objections, right? Those objections, those comments, that language becomes like the language you use in your marketing. So you will be more skilled than a skilled copywriter who doesn't know your person. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And who better to know their client than themselves?
Yeah.
And those two go really well hand in hand, sales and marketing, right? It's like,
Yeah.
what's the message, then having conversations with people and guiding them to choose you.
And I love, in the beginning, doing your own sales calls, because what happens is you're in front of your ideal client right now, and everything they say, you just write down, right? And then when you go to post on social media or send out an email, you just can literally use, obviously you're not giving away confidential information, but you can take the gist of the story, right? Maybe somebody that was coming to you said, do I need a bookkeeper and a CPA? Do I need an accountant and a CPA? Like, I don't really know what the difference is between you guys. Okay, this is gold, right? This is absolute gold. If they say that, you might want to do an email. The difference between a CPA, an accountant, and a bookkeeper, right? And now you're writing that piece of material with a call to action at the bottom of, and if you want to schedule a free one-on-one consultation, I'd love to walk you through XYZ. Right?
So
and all of a sudden, it's like, you've got the marketing, you've got the sales. So don't outsource that in the beginning.
Great advice. And, popping in my head, like, don't know if I've ever thought like a sales call becomes a piece of content. Like, very interesting, because you're getting a story of their business, their challenges, things that have happened. You can take those notes, and now with where artificial intelligence is, you can plug all those notes in and say, write me a blog post based on this experience. It'll be completely not generic, but it'll be confidential because no names are being named.
Right.
And you can have that so quickly nowadays, but the source of the content is gold. Plus, you're learning, you're thinking deeper about the conversation, listening in a different way. What a great exercise.
Yeah. And I'm still, I have a director of marketing, but I'm still involved in marketing. And I am auditing specific sales calls. So like yesterday, I just randomly picked a sales call, I audited it. And her big objection was, she really wants her daughter to step up as a manager, but her daughter's nervous to manage the other manager. And I was like, okay, let's do an episode on working with family members and how to talk to family members and manage family members. And I wouldn't even have thought to say that without watching that call.
Wow. So cool. So cool. That's a wonderful tip for our listener, and for myself, actually. I love that. It's fantastic. So sales and marketing, one of those very important pieces. You don't want to get, for sure in the early stages. And like you said yourself, 50 employees are still very connected to the sales and marketing. It's the heartbeat of the organization, nervous system and heartbeat, I guess you could say. And what are some of the other pieces that, okay, we're going to try and find things that we can get off of our plate? And that's another key one. I had when you were talking about, don't take the tough ones and try and outsource those. And I remember when we owned a cafe, bistro, it was a family bistro, owned it with my mother. And she would say, oh, I need to take a day off. I'm going to take off Sunday. Sorry, I'm going to take off Friday. What was it? I'm going to mess up my own story here.
That's okay.
She was going to take off the Sunday. That's what it was, because it's slow. There's not as many customers in there. I'm like, Mom, you should be there on game day, Friday, Saturday, when it's the most important, the most customers, where the most things can go wrong. But I'm paying those people to do something that I could easily do. And I'm like, exactly. You shouldn't be taking, that was the perfect day to not be there because it's not game day. And so I think often we all think like that, where we think, oh, I don't want to pay somebody to do this because I can do it myself. And that could be the flag of like, that is exactly what you should be taking off your plate.
Yeah. And honestly, I would consider that still like an operator mindset. Somebody who is like in the day-to-day, they're not seeing big picture. Big picture, to get out of the day-to-day operations, you're going to start to outsource everything. You're going to outsource, like you had said, the slow day, and eventually you're going to outsource the game day, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to get out of that operator mindset and step into an owner mindset, which is not like, well, I could do that. Of course you could. Like, you're amazing. You started this business. Of course you could. Doesn't mean you should.
That's right. That's right. And it's interesting. I like that. The operator mindset, when you think of the example of my mother, she never got to the mindset of the business owner. Like it was, and they eventually got out of the business. They were it was time to sort of retire and do those sorts of things. But one of the things that just killed her was the staff, right? Managing all the problems with staff, finding them, dealing with because it's, a cafe and a bistro, it's like front of house stuff. You can't be off one day. You've got, it has huge implications, creates lots of challenge. Oh, I can't come in. I'm sick. Can't work this day, that day. That really burned her out. And if you think about it, that's eventually, as an operator mindset, is, well, I always have to deal with that. Right? Whereas the business owner mindset would be like, how can I get someone to deal with that or have a system in place to deal with that? Because then the opportunity, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that transition, because, just thinking of my mom in this situation, and I know our listener is either gone through this or will eventually get to that point where if they want to go bigger, they got to break out of the operator mindset. Yeah. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So there are things that are going to happen. And for instance, like your mom's situation, for sure, we're going to have somebody calling sick. Like it is a guarantee at some point, someone is calling in sick last minute, right? Or they don't even call in sick. They just don't show, right? We know it will happen. So we want to be thinking about all the things in your business that could happen and will happen. It's just a matter of time. And you want to be thinking about, well, what would be the system for that? So when somebody no shows, right? When somebody misses a deadline, right? When they're supposed to be giving their bookkeeping, they're reconciling by the 7th of the month and they miss it. It's going to happen. Like you're going to have somebody miss their deadline. Okay. We get to think when it hasn't happened in the moment, we get to be clear-headed and think, what do I want to do in this moment? How do I want to treat the customer? Do I want to go above and beyond and do anything for them? Do I need to refund them? Do I need to give a bonus of some sort? Like, what do I want to do to make them feel good about the situation? What am I going to do with the employee that has just done this, right? So you get to be proactive when it hasn't happened and you're just calm. When it happens and you're irritated and you're reactive, you may not be in the best mindset to make that system up, right? So anytime I have something that happens in the moment and I don't really have a system for it and I just wing it, I do the best I can do in that moment. But I always take a minute the next day to think, okay, it's over and done with. If this happens again, what would I like to see happen? How do I want to handle that employee? How do I want to handle the customer? And what happens if it needs to get done? So am I swooping in and doing it? Am I asking a different bookkeeper to do it? What am I going to do? And you might realize I don't even have anybody else to do it. So of course it would come down to me. Well, you might decide proactively, I want to have a business with minimum of 2 people so that there is always somebody else that can step in and help out. if that were to happen, right? So you start to get to ask yourself, like, is this serving me? Is this the kind of business I want to build? And you get to answer it and be super honest of yes or no, and then proactively make those decisions.
Mm. So great. Some great ways to think about when those things happen and to start planning for dealing with that. And I think that's critical. And, thinking of my mom, it really was almost like owner mindset burnout.
Yeah.
And so having done that and maybe thinking about these things, you start going up you're ascending, I guess, to a place where you could really be in a position where it isn't on your plate, even those higher important tasks, or like with my mother's situation, game day, where it's like super busy.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, you work with, obviously, you've got your own businesses, 3 locations. On the dance side, you've got the organization that helps organize other organizations build well-oiled operations in their firms. I'd love to know what you're seeing in terms of the economic climate. Like what's going on? What's the heartbeat, I guess, of your clients? What are they dealing with that's different than maybe what they were dealing with a year or two ago?
I think there's always something that's going on, right? Like whether it's they're nervous about an upcoming election, they're nervous about, is a recession going to hit? But here's what I always tell people. There's always something, right? It's just getting in their mindset of what is actually on their radar and what isn't, right? So for me, no matter what the external things are that are going on, usually the internal stuff for them remains the same. I know what my person is usually struggling with. I know what they're trying to get through. But yeah, I can use that external information maybe in marketing or in a sales call to like bring it up or justify it or whatever I want to say, right? But at the same time, I still have a need and a solution for a problem they have, right? So I know people can get really nervous when they're like inflation or recession. People are scared. Yeah, but people are still buying. People are still spending money every single day, right? Those people that are scared, that are like cutting back on this or cutting back on that, you can still say to them, how much did you spend on Amazon this week? Oh, there were Amazon boxes being delivered. I can promise you that, right? People will spend money on what they value. So how do we make sure that they still value us, that we are a non-negotiable, that they would not cut us out no matter what the situation is moving forward? So that's where I just start to change my messaging if it pops up. Now, honestly, I am not hearing at the moment from the calls I've been auditing, I have not heard recession, election, inflation. I'm not hearing that right now.
Interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Very interesting. I've not heard that as an objection. The objections I'm still hearing is, I just don't know if I have the time to do this right now. I don't know if I can afford to hire somebody right now, right? It's still the normal objections I typically get. However, you've got to stay on the pulse of it. So I'm not going to just assume it's not going to be a big deal. Something could happen massively in the next month, 90 days, et cetera, that all of a sudden they're like, oh my goodness, a recession is coming. How is this going to impact me, right? And I have to be ready for when that happens.
Interesting. It is interesting when you think about it. There may be those underlying, always there concerns, do I have the money? Do I have the time? Are maybe amplified with a worry, a nonverbal concern of an election, a recession, until they're really into it. And it's like, we are in this, and this is the problem. And it's kind of like stacking on top of those already. Yeah. Do I have time? Do I have money?
Yeah.
Do I have the capabilities? Whatever the case might be. So, but that's interesting to hear that. It's not, we hear about it in the media perhaps, but it's not necessarily verbally a concern for the people you're working with.
And who's your client, right? Like in bookkeeping in general, right? Who is your ideal client? If they're a small business owner that's too busy doing their own stuff, they might not be looking at the media like a typical 9-to-5er. Well, if you serve a typical 9-to-5er, then they might be reading the newspaper.
We are
every
in a
day,
recession.
yes, they're freaking themselves
Especially right
out.
there. I read it every day.
Yeah.
Right.
So who is your person? Like,
that's right.
My person is too busy to read the newspaper. Like, they're just not even there at all, right? They're doing their own thing. They are just working so much. But who is your person, and what are they experiencing? And are they saying it when they're on a call with you, right? Are they saying it in an email? If they're saying it, you better have content and things to bust those objections.
That's right. I would imagine our listener is dealing with a lot of your clients.
That's what I'm thinking.
Right? So
yeah. And I'm telling you, we get between 50 and 100 consults a week of sales calls, and I just randomly audit each of the salespeople. I have not heard that. Like, I heard it maybe like a year ago when we were like, oh, it's coming. And now it's like,
right.
We've been saying it's been coming for so long that my person's like, it's fine, right? In my head, I'm thinking it's definitely coming. We don't know when, but it's coming. And all I'm doing is proactively, like, really trying to stay profitable, really trying to stack cash to help make sure I'm more sustainable, right?
Right.
But I'm still behaving in a way that, like, the sky's the limit. Let's go. Let's grow this business.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, there's lots of great things happening out there, and which is great. Which I do have another question about your clients, and maybe this would be interesting for our listener, which is a lot of your listeners would have a situation like yourself where it's like, do they have their finances in order? Because a part of operations, very important one, I would say our listener is going to say it's the most important one, which would be the finance part of the house. What are you typically hearing around? Do people have that handled? Do they, because finding a great accountant or a great bookkeeper is not easy.
No, it's not easy. And I will say my business owners, some of them have like very weird relationships with their bookkeeper, CPA, accountant. Like, some of them think they're the boss, and they're like, well, I got to ask my bookkeeper if I can do that or not. And I'm like, hold up. Like, your bookkeeper is there.
All our listeners are pumping the air right now.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Like, they think you're in charge. They think you're like running the business.
Right.
And we teach them, like, you need a good bookkeeper. You need a good CPA accountant for them to give you the facts, the data, all of that information. But I teach mine, you also need to be learning and understanding what those mean. Like, don't let them just send you a profit and loss and not like know what that is. Right.
That's right.
And demand you're getting those statements. Like, some of my people are like, I don't really look at them, so they don't really send them to me anymore. I'm like, no. Like, the data directs us for next month. We need the data, right? So I am a big believer in they need to know their numbers. They need to know the data. We teach them how often they should be getting data from bookkeepers, CPAs, accountants, and then how often they should be doing it internally, right? Like, getting a pulse on where their business is at specifically. So yeah, I mean, cash flow is it's everything to the business, right? So you had said before, like, where should we be focusing? Well, I tell my people, marketing and sales until cash flow is not an issue. And then once marketing and sales is picking up, you've got to make sure, though, like, your systems inside of your fulfillment, your customer service is at a level where you're going to keep them. Because if you're marketing, but your product isn't great, your service isn't great, they're not going to stay. So all that marketing, time and energy is just wasted. Yeah. So how do we make sure you've got fulfillment, customer service systems dialed in, so when you spend time and energy on marketing and sales, you keep them, right? Now, the way that I know how I'm doing is by looking at my numbers, right? By actually diving into the basics and where is my money at and what is it financially. And as we're recording this, it's the 7th of the month, which means I'm getting my last month's books done. Like, it should be delivered by today. And I will immediately look at last month to see where we at, where were their problems, right? And really using that information to guide me for next month on what activities need to change for me. Like, my finances tell me what to do next.
Very cool. Very cool. And an interesting one for our listener is that feedback is, where are you at with your client, and who's their team, right? And really reinforcing that you're doing the books for them, and they do have an interesting relationships because they're there with the money. They're there. It's a very important piece of the business. They often have a direct relationship with the owner, more so than the accountant on a regular basis, right? So it's an interesting one there. But the bookkeeper, should be saying, okay, we have this information. Who's on your team to help you? Do you have a business coach? Are you working with an organization like yourself? Because these numbers, how are you going to work with these numbers? Because if they start to think, well, the bookkeeper is going to help me make decisions on what I should do with my business, that could be not the best. Just like what happened with your first accountant would say, oh, don't make any profit. So a very good one to be aware of that, and also a really great question to put you in a really high advisor kind of position is to ask that question, like, who's your team? Who's advising you? Where do you go for support and guidance? Well, I don't know that there's many bookkeepers that pull that question out of in a prospective meeting.
Yeah. Well, and just like, we want them to be empowered. We want these business owners to have the data, have the numbers, and be able to make moves from it. But if they become so reliant on the bookkeeper, right, of like, well, hey, Michael, what do you think I should do? Should I hire? Right? It's like, well, Michael, do you know all of the details of the business? Do you know like who they're thinking they're going to hire and what that would bring in? And there is so much more they have to dig into, right? So some of you might be phenomenal business strategists and you can actually provide that to your clients. But some of you are like, I'm just telling you the data, what happened last month. Like, you do with that what you want. Like, but here's the information. So it's interesting to see, certain people that have different types of relationships with those specific individuals.
Yeah, really, really good one. And I like that. I'm glad I asked, and some good nuggets there for our listener to be thinking about. And also, leveraging what they know and see, because it's not like they work with what they often work with, dozen or two clients or more in larger firms, where they can see like, this person's thriving. Oh, they work with this person and they're getting advised by that. Like, that's where you can bring some advisory as well and knowledge to reinforce your relationship with them. Some good stuff. This has been a really great conversation, Stacy. I'd love for you to tell our listener a little bit more about the work you do in case they want to learn more, maybe work with you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having me on. This is a fun conversation. I've got a couple places. So I have a podcast called Well-Oiled Operations. I am heavy, we give tons and tons of free content on our Instagram. So that's another great place. At Stacy Tuschl is our handle. But we really specialize in people that want to grow their team. They want to hire, they want to start to get out of the day-to-day operations. So we're definitely geared for somebody who's like, I want to be more than just me running the show, right? They start to see, I want this business, but I don't want the stress of just being a solopreneur. So if that is something that interests you, I would say the podcast is a great place to start, and that's at Well-Oiled Operations.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, that's fantastic. I know our listeners will likely be jumping over there to start listening. And on behalf of our listener, I want to thank you for your generosity in coming on the show and sharing your wisdom.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all ours. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.